Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today, I wanted to continue a look at some of the new skill gems that are coming out in the 3.15 Expedition expansion, and today we're going to look at the single most complex and most difficult to work out skill of them all. This is Battle Mage's Cry. Now, I want to start with a disclaimer. Firstly, I do not recommend League starting with a build that is based around this skill. The reason for that is that it is a really complicated skill, and it's the sort of thing that will probably take quite some time for people to figure out really strong builds for. Secondly, it's going to be something that will, generally speaking, want a fair number of unique items to use well. However, that's not to say that it can't work at all. It's just that I'm not confident that I can think of ways to make this amazing early on. It presses you to find different types of gear that wouldn't normally work together. So you want to have weapons with decent attack stats and also spellcast stats. And that stuff tends to exist a lot more later in a league. With nothing further about that, let's have a look at the skill in action. What you're going to see is the character uttering a war cry. That is the Battle Mage's Cry. Now they have linked Battle Mage's Cry to Firestorm. And what that's going to do is it's going to empower their weapon with the skill Firestorm. For as long as their attacks remain exerted, they are going to make exerted attacks that will trigger a firestorm to go off. So you'll see here you've got in the bottom middle of the screen, you'll be able. Oh, actually, you'll see that there's a firestorm indicator there that is currently blocked. So there's the war cry, and there is fire raining from the sky. So in slower motion, you'll see the first thing that they're doing is they're casting Consecrated Path, or they're attacking with Consecrated Path, and then that is triggering this fireball from the sky. Then they've still got another one left, and then at this point I think they need to utter another war cry pretty soon. So we are now going to see another zone where they're going to be doing it in an estuary map, and again it's much the same gameplay. You're seeing firstly the Consecrated Path goes off, and then after that, you're seeing the massive rain of fireballs from the sky from Firestorm. Now, you're not required to use Firestorm with this skill. You probably don't want to, because I don't think that Firestorm is a very good skill at the moment. However, you can attach any spell to Battle Mage's Cry. And you can also use any melee attack. Obviously, we're seeing this player use a slam, Consecrated Path, but you don't need to. It appears that you could use a skill like Elemental Hit if you wanted to. You could use a skill like Double Strike, or you could use pretty much anything else. I'm not sure how it works in conjunction. I presume it can't be used in conjunction with channeled attacks like Blade Flurry or Cyclone, but some of these mechanics we're just going to need to see how they work in practice. So, the base duration is 5 seconds. This counts the total power of enemies in range, and then the buff grants you 10% increased critical strike chance per 5 power, up to a maximum of 30%. Power is a measure of the number of enemies that surround you at the time that you utter the war cry. You get 1 point of power for each normal monster, 2 for each magic, 10 for each rare, and 20 for each unique boss. The buff also makes increases and reductions to spell damage that are affecting your character also apply to your attacks, but at 25% of their value per 5 power, up to a maximum of 150%. So that's a complex way of saying that if you are near one boss, then you are going to get 100% of your spell damage counting as additional attack damage. If you're near 2 bosses or a boss and a rare or 3 rares, then you're going to get 150% of your spell damage mods affecting your character working on your attack damage as well. So this is an interesting skill in that it causes you to be able to benefit from to be both attacking and casting spells, and dealing considerable damage with both. This is a hard combination to get to work together on a lot of other builds, but Battle Mage's Cry, at least in theory, is empowering this sort of playstyle. Very similar to Cast on Critical Strike, but with Cast on Critical Strike builds, usually you go all in on the spell damage, and any damage that you happen to do with your attacks is a bonus. I think that Battle Mage's Cry is trying for something a bit different, where you are primarily doing damage with attacks, but you have considerable additional damage projection coming from your Battle Mage Cry spells. So, how would I go about building around this? Well, the first thing I did was I had a look through various unique weapons. What I was looking for was an unusual combination of stats. I was looking for weapons that had melee properties, but that also had spellcasting related properties on them. I was looking for things that might work well together with the unusual scaling Battle Mage's Cry has. Now, I didn't find, it's not that I found absolutely nothing, but I didn't find anything that jumped out at me as, oh yeah, this is amazing, amazing, amazing. I just found a few things that looked reasonable in there. So the first one that I wanted to point out as something that you might consider using in this setup is the unique Claw Rive. The unique Claw Touch of Anguish. I'm looking at the wrong spot on the screen. So Touch of Anguish has an interesting thing where skills chain an additional time when at maximum frenzy charges, and these deal considerable amounts of attack damage. So they're not bad as attack claws, but they have that important skills chain an additional time when at max frenzy charges. If you're dual wielding this, your skills are going to chain an additional twice. If you are using a skill that is able to benefit from chaining, then dual wielding Touch of Anguish may well be a way to go in this setup. You're just going to need to find ways to get to and stay at maximum frenzy charges, but you do have a chance to gain a frenzy charge when you kill a frozen enemy. So there's a lot of potential there, but it's not something that I think is an absolute, this is an amazing combination. It's just something that may be good enough to use. Next up in the list of unique staves, we have the Grey Spire, which is just something that's really generically good. It adds a lot of global damage, which means that it will scale both your attacks and your damage. It does some attack damage. It also uses Martyr of Innocence in the same line as something that scales both attacks and damage, but it's not extraordinary at either. The thing I like about the Grey Spire is that it does have the increased maximum resistances, which is a really powerful defensive layer, and your attacks are fast with this weapon. And that's really good because you probably want to be moving around a lot, unless you built tremendously tanky. And you also want to be in a position where once you've done your Warcry, you can very quickly get off a donk on the head with the Grey Spire. In terms of unique swords, there were two that jumped out at me. So firstly, there's the usually pretty bad Fiddleitus' Spike. The reason that I mention this is that it has all the benefits of very fast attack speed, and it also has the synergies with Herald of Thunder. Now, this can add a considerable amount of lightning damage to your attacks and spells, but the other thing that's really cool with Fiddleitus' Spike is that there is a divination card called Echoes of Love for a 2 implicit corrupted one. This is self-farmable, and it drops in maps that have Malagaro as the map boss, and if you turn it in on characters that are level 1 through 39, you have a very good chance of getting very good corruptions. So the list of possible corruptions for thrusting one-handed swords includes Skills Fire an additional projectile, which is amazing on some of the skills you might want to use in this setup, such as Ball Lightning. Chance to gain Onslaught on kill, damage penetrates elemental resistances, gain a frenzy charge after spending, I think it's a lot of mana, 200 mana. You probably don't want that one. Increased attack speed, increased critical strike chance. Literally all of these do something, and 5 of the 6 are good. Resolute Technique is terrible, and it ruins the item. But because Resolute Technique is item level 40, this means that if your character that is turning in the Echoes of Love Divination card is level 39 or lower, you can't get it. And so that means that you can pretty easily get yourself a Fiddleitus' Spike with good corruptions on it, in a way that you can't really do that for a lot of other items. And so that may make this useful, but you'll have to weigh up the fact that it is a pretty terrible combat weapon. You absolutely have to be using Herald of Thunder for this to work, and you probably want to be using a hard-hitting lightning spell. One that comes to mind is Ball Lightning, because it just does a lot of damage and it can benefit from those additional projectiles. But I'll leave the question as to exactly what to go with up to you. The other one that I wanted to point out is the Rippling Thoughts, the Surging Thoughts and the Rippling Thoughts. So these are basically the same item. These come from Harbinger content, and they basically a built-in cast on attack Glacial Cascade. It's not exactly Glacial Cascade, but it's sort of broadly similar to that. So this already is conjuring up a situation where you are doing a lot of, you're attacking and you're doing spell damage, and additionally, you've got increased spell damage on a weapon that is already pretty good for its combat stats. So the Surging Thoughts and the lesser brother, the Rippling Thoughts, which are basically the same item, the only difference is that the buff that's given to you by the Surging Thoughts is better, this is something that you could conceivably use. This is a better option than Fiddleitis' Spike, but it's also considerably harder to get your hands on, whether you are in trade-enabled leagues or solo self-found leagues. So those were the weapons that came to mind first up. Ultimately, I do think that a really customized rare item is probably going to be the best way to build around this skill, but there's a lot of sort of silly stuff that you could probably do with this skill. In terms of combinations, I think you want to be using the same elements. So whatever your attack is, you want to be using you want to be using a weapon that scales the same sort of elements. So and then a spell that deals that element of damage. So what I mean by that is that if you are using a pure physical damage weapon, then you probably want to be triggering a skill like Exsanguinate or Reap that deals a lot of physical damage. Lastly, there are expected to be changes in this patch that will cause triggered skills to cost mana. So do keep that in mind. You will not be able to trivialize mana in the 3.15 environment with triggered skills, but that's just going to mean that you'll need to use one less aura on your character, and you might need to use one mana flask. Okay, so that's my initial thoughts on Battle Mage's Cry. This is a very complicated skill, and I'm sure that there will be a lot of min-maxing that's done before people find out a good way to play this. Once more, I do not suggest that you league start this, but it does look like it'll be something that'll be a lot of fun to maybe come back to after you've got a character that's well established in the league, and then come along and try and make something to really take advantage of this skill. If you've thought of something, though, that looks really broken with this, because I'm sure there will be something really broken with it, definitely mention it in the comments below. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there. I hope your Varlorps have interesting results, and I will see you for the next one.